Hey, everybody. Good morning. I wanted to talk about a concept that I began to develop in my first book, Soulshaping, A Journey of Self-Creation, a book that I'm returning back to a lot now as I deepen into the development of this encodings model or encodings method. I think that a lot of the fundamental structures and scaffolding and terminology that's useful emanates actually from this particular book. And one of the things that I had written in this book that I think is really true and worth talking about, particularly because it's often the case that many of us beat ourselves up if we don't proceed on this transformative path at a particular pace. I think we have generally really unrealistic ideas about the pace of transformation in this world. The sociology of transformation, just all of the things that are up against us ancestrally and just culturally. And I think the goal of the work, if you're doing some kind of work on yourself, is to arrive at a place that you can sustain rather than just get a glimpse. So the term from soul shaping was, if you step on the right path at the wrong time, you stepped on the wrong path, right? So briefly, I knew there was a writer living somewhere inside of this guy. And I would sit down at various times and just say, it's time to write, because I knew it was in me. But nothing really happened, just goofy stuff happened because I wasn't ready. I hadn't suffered enough, or I hadn't learned enough, or I hadn't grown enough, or I hadn't made sense of this enough to write about these particular kind. I mean, I could have written about certain things, but stuff related to the quest for meaning and transformative processes and clearing emotional debris. I couldn't write about it until I'd done some of it. Never all of it, but some of it. So I think it's really important. I won't say too much about the nature of the encodings method right now, but really the idea is that you come into this birth with a whole host of particular inclinations, actualizable gifts, callings, offerings, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of categories I'm working with. And, I think it's really important to arrive at the place when you're ready to open the gift and you're ready to bring the gift into offering, if that's what its intention is. We beat ourselves up when we don't move too quickly. We don't grant ourselves permissions to be late bloomers, but how can you not be a late bloomer in a culture that doesn't prioritize authentic growth? I mean, how can you not be a late bloomer? And what does it mean to be a late bloomer? In a culture that is completely dissociated and distracted, and now so completely polarized because of divide and conquer algorithms that nobody can meet anybody else in the center anymore, right? So it's going to take some time. You're up against it. And that's not to say to be discouraged about doing the work. Do the work. There's nothing more important than finding your soul's place in this world for you and for all of us. But it's important to allow yourself to build the scaffolding. So what was the scaffolding that I had to build before I could write with a little bit more eloquence and bring an offering to other people rather than just writing in my journal for me? Because I had done that off and on for many years. And it had something to do with experiences. It had something to do with building foundational structures. It had something to do with building the healthy self-concept. That's part of the scaffolding. If you don't believe that you have worth, that you have value, that you have something to offer, even if you have something extremely brilliant living inside of you, which I believe everybody does, I really do. How do you get to it? How do you might be able to come close to it or hover above it, but how do you really actualize it in a world that really doesn't focus on self-originating or soul-originating consciousness, right? I mean, this is a whole other world. So many people, we see this in social media, we see this in various parts of society, are, trying to build their sense of self solely on the basis of whether they get external validation. And that is part of the healthy ego building. That is part of becoming what Ram Dass said, you have to become something before you become nothing. When you become nothing, you become everything. That had a bit of a bypassing quality to it, and it depends how you interpret it. But the way I interpret it is, you need to really build a healthy self-concept, which often we have to do in the world because we weren't appropriately validated growing up. So that's part of the process. But the idea is, at some point, you catch yourself and you realize it's enough already. I have value. And now I want the sense of validation to emanate from the actualization of the soul itself, that which is encoded in you. So you have this very private, very personal, intrinsically validating relationship with that which is encoded within you. And that's when it gets liberating. That's when it gets liberating. And that's when the offering takes on a whole other level of significance. You're no longer sort of looking, as many of them do, to other people's ideas in order to present your offering. You're no longer having to quote every other person, because you know what your offering is. You know it emanated from your soul's caverns. You know it's intrinsic to who you are in this lifetime. There's nothing more important than this. But at the same time, it's really important to build the structures and the scaffolding, and to grant yourself permission to take your time. We're not conditioned to take our time, but take your time with this. I mean, if you have 1 year of the glory of living in the heart of an encoded life, but you had to be patient and work your way through a whole lot of muck for 20 years, just to have that year, in my view, is absolutely worth it. If you don't do it that way, if you just keep pushing yourself to a calling, trying to write your way through something you're not ready to write about, trying to present yourself as something that you aren't yet, in fact, you will never ever know the satisfaction of living a truly encoded life. So the quote again, and check out Soulshaping. It's a really, I'm going to give it a lot of credit. In the old days I didn't, but now that I'm working on encodings, I really understand that the emphasis here on the process, right? That we are a work in process more than we are a work in progress. And I think if we think of it that way, we are more likely to actually make progress. Anyway, I hope that's helpful.